The economy of Venezuela is largely based on the petroleum sector and manufacturing. Revenue from petroleum exports accounts for more than 50% of the country's GDP and roughly 95% of total exports. Venezuela is the fifth largest member of OPEC by oil production. From the 1950s to the early 1980s, the Venezuelan economy experienced a steady growth that attracted many immigrants, with the nation enjoying the highest standard of living in Latin America. During the collapse of oil prices in the 1980s, the economy contracted, the monetary sign commenced a progressive devaluation, and inflation skyrocketed to reach peaks of 84% in 1989 and 99% in 1996, 3 years prior to Hugo Chavez taking office. With high oil prices and rising government expenditures, Venezuela's economy grew by 9% in 2007. Manufacturing contributed 17% of GDP in 2006. Venezuela manufactures and exports heavy industry products such as steel, aluminium and cement, with production concentrated around Ciudad Guayana, near the Guri Dam, one of the largest in the world and the provider of about 3/4 of Venezuela's electricity. Other notable manufacturing includes electronics and automobiles, as well as beverages and foodstuffs. Agriculture in Venezuela accounts for approximately 3% of GDP, 10% of the labor force, and at least 1/4 of Venezuela's land area. Venezuela exports rice, corn, fish, tropical fruit, coffee, pork, and beef. The country is not self-sufficient in most areas of agriculture. In spite of strained relations between the two countries, the United States has been Venezuela's most important trading partner. U.S. exports to Venezuela have included machinery, agricultural products, medical instruments, and cars. Venezuela is one of the top 4 suppliers of foreign oil to the United States. About 500 U.S. companies are represented in Venezuela. According to Central Bank of Venezuela, the government received from 1998 to 2008 around $325 billion United States dollars through oil production and export in general. And according to the International Energy Agency, to August 2015 has production of 2.4 million barrels per day. 500,000 of which go to the United States of America. Since Hugo Chavez's socialist revolution half dismantled its PDVSA oil giant corporation in 2002 by firing most of its 20,000-strong dissident professional human capital, and imposed stringent currency controls in 2003 in an attempt to prevent capital flight. There have been a steady decline in oil production and exports and a series of stern currency devaluations, disrupting the economy. Further yet, price controls, expropriation of numerous farmlands and all types of industries, and other disputable government policies including a near-total freeze on any access to foreign currency at reasonable, official, interchange rates, have caused severe shortages in Venezuela and steep price rises of all types of supplies and goods, including foodstuffs, household consumables, spare parts, tools, chemical, pharmaceutical and medical supplies, etc., forcing many manufacturers to either cut production, restrict product lines, close down, or ultimately abandon the country, as has been the case with several technology firms, including most automobile makers. In 2015, Venezuela had the world's highest inflation rate, with the rate surpassing 100%, becoming the highest in the country's history. 1922 to 1964. When oil was discovered at the Maracaibo strike in 1922, Venezuela's dictator, Juan Vicente Gómez, allowed U.S. oil companies to write Venezuela's petroleum law. But oil history was made in 1943 when Standard Oil of New Jersey accepted a new agreement in Venezuela based on the 50-50 principle, a landmark event. Terms even more favorable to Venezuela were negotiated in 1945. After a coup brought to power a left-leaning government that included Juan Pablo Pérez Alfonso. From the 1950s to the early 1980s, the Venezuelan economy was the strongest and most prosperous in South America. The continuous growth during that period attracted many immigrants. In 1958, a new government again included Pérez Alfonso, who devised a plan for the international oil cartel that would become OPEC. In 1973, Venezuela voted to nationalize its oil industry outright, effective 1 January 1976, with Petróleos de Venezuela taking over and presiding over a number of holding companies. In subsequent years, Venezuela built a vast refining and marketing system in the US and Europe. During Pérez Jiménez's dictatorship from 1952 to 1958, Venezuela enjoyed remarkably high GDP growth, so that in the late 1950s Venezuela's real GDP per capita almost reached West Germany's. On 1950, Venezuela was the world's fourth largest, wealthiest nation per capita. However, from 1958–1959 onward, Rómulo Betancourt inherited an enormous internal and external debt caused by rampant public spending during the dictatorship. Nevertheless, he managed to balance Venezuela's public budget and initiate an unsuccessful agrarian reform. 1960s–1990s, buoyed by a strong oil sector in the 1960s and 1970s. Venezuela's governments were able to maintain social harmony by spending fairly large amounts on public programs including healthcare, education, transport, and food subsidies. Literacy and welfare programs benefited tremendously from these conditions. Because of the oil wealth, Venezuelan workers enjoyed the highest wages in Latin America. This situation was reversed when oil prices collapsed during the 1980s. The economy contracted, and the number of people living in poverty rose from 36% in 1984 to 66% in 1995. The country suffered a severe banking crisis. When world oil prices collapsed in the 1980s, the economy contracted and inflation levels rose, remaining between 6 and 12% from 1982 to 1986. In the late 80s and early 90s, inflation rose to around 30 to 40% annually, with a 1989 peak of 84%. The mid-1990s saw annual rates of 50 to 60%, with an exceptional peak in 1996 at 99.88%. Subsequently, inflation then remained in a range of around 15% to 30% until the end of Hugo Chávez's presidency. By 1998, the economic crisis had grown even worse. Per capita GDP was at the same level as 1963, down a third from its 1978 peak, and the purchasing power of the average salary was a third of its 1978 level. 1999 to 2012, Hugo Chávez was elected president in December 1998 and took office in February 1999. In 2000, oil prices soared, offering Chávez funds not seen since Venezuela's economic collapse since the 1980s. Chávez then used economic policies that were more socialistic than those of his predecessors, using populist approaches with oil funds that made Venezuela's economy dependent on high oil prices. Chávez also played a leading role within OPEC to reinvigorate that organization and obtain members' adherence to lower production quotas designed to drive up the oil price. Venezuelan oil minister Ali Rodriguez Arick's announcement in 1999 that his country would respect OPEC production quotas marked a historic turnaround from the nation's traditional pro-US oil policy. In the first 4 years of the Chávez presidency, the economy grew, at first, then contracted from 2001 to 2003 to GDP levels similar to 1997, at first because of low oil prices, then because of the turmoil caused by the 2002 coup attempt and the 2002–2003 business strike. Other factors in the decline were an exodus of capital from the country, and a reluctance of foreign investors. Gross domestic product was 50.0 trillion bolívares in 1998. At the bottom of the recession, 2003, it was 42.4 trillion bolívares. However, with a calmer political situation in 2004, GDP rebounded 50.1 trillion bolívares, and rose to 66.1 trillion bolívares in 2007. The government sought international assistance to finance reconstruction after massive flooding and landslides in December 1999 caused an estimated $15 billion to $20 billion in damage. The hardest-hit sectors in the worst recession years, 2002-2003, were construction, petroleum, commerce and manufacturing. The drop in the petroleum sector was caused by adherence to the OPEC quota established in 2002 and the virtual cessation of exports during the PDVSA-led Venezuelan general strike of 2002-2003. The non-petroleum sector of the economy contracted by 6.5% in 2002. The bolivar, which has been suffering from serious inflation and devaluation relative to international standards since the late 1980s, continued to weaken. The inflation rate, as measured by Consumer Price Index, was 35.8% in 1998, falling to a low of 12.5% in 2001 and rising to 31.1% in 2003. Historically, the highest yearly inflation was 99.9% in 1996. On 23 January 2003, in an attempt to support the bolivar and bolster the government's declining level of international reserves, as well as to mitigate the adverse impact from the oil industry work stoppage on the financial system, the Ministry of Finance and the central bank suspended foreign exchange trading. On 6 February, the government created CADIVR, a currency control board charged with handling foreign exchange procedures. The board set the US dollar exchange rate at 1,596 bolívares to the dollar for purchases and 1,600 to the dollar for sales. The housing market in Venezuela shrunk significantly, with developers avoiding Venezuela due to the massive number of companies who have had their property expropriated by the government. According to the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal, Venezuela had the weakest property rights in the world, scoring only 5.0 on a scale of 100. Expropriation without compensation is common. The shortage of housing is so significant that in 2007, a group of squatters occupied Centro Financiero con Finanzas, a cancelled economic center that was supposed to symbolize Venezuela's growing economy. The Venezuelan economy shrank 5.8% in the first 3 months of 2010 compared to the same period of 2009 and now had the highest inflation rate in Latin America at 30.5%. President Hugo Chavez expressed optimism that Venezuela would emerge from recession, despite the International Monetary Fund forecasts showing that Venezuela would be the only country in the region to remain in recession that year. The IMF qualified the economic recovery of Venezuela as delayed and weak in comparison with other countries of the region. Following Chavez's death in early 2013, Venezuela's economy continued to fall into an even greater recession. 2013 present in 2013. According to the Global Misery Index, Venezuela ranked as the top spot globally with the highest misery index score. The International Finance Corporation ranked Venezuela one of the lowest countries for doing business, ranking it 180 of 185 countries for its doing business 2013 report, with protecting investors and taxes being its worst rankings. In early 2013, the Bolivar fuerte was devalued due to growing shortages in Venezuela. The shortages included necessities such as toilet paper, milk, and flour. Shortages also affected healthcare in Venezuela. with the University of Caracas Medical Hospital ceasing to perform surgeries due to the lack of supplies in 2014. The Bolivarian government's policies also made it difficult to import drugs and other medical supplies. Due to such complications, many Venezuelans died avoidable deaths, with medical professionals having to use limited resources to use methods that were replaced decades ago. In 2014, Venezuela entered an economic recession, having its GDP growth decline to -3.0%. Venezuela was placed at the top of the global misery index for the second year in a row. The Economist said Venezuela was probably the world's worst managed economy. Citibank believed that the economy has little prospect of improvement, and that the state of the Venezuelan economy was a disaster. For the Doing Business 2014 report by the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank, Venezuela continued to be ranked low and dropped down one rank. The Heritage Foundation ranked Venezuela 175th out of 178 countries in economic freedom for 2014, classifying it as a repressed economy according to the principles the foundation advocates. According to Foreign Policy, Venezuela was ranked last in the world on its base yield index due to low returns that investors receive when investing in Venezuela. In a 2014 report titled Scariest Places on the Business Frontiers by Zurich Financial Services and reported by Bloomberg, Venezuela was ranked as the riskiest emerging market in the world. Many companies such as Toyota, Ford Motor Co., General Motors Company, Air Canada, Air Europa, American Airlines, Copa Airlines, TAP Airlines, and United Airlines slowed or stopped operation due to the lack of hard currency in the country, with Venezuela owing such foreign companies billions of dollars. Venezuela also dismantled CADIVI, a government body in charge of currency exchange. CADIVI was known for holding money from the private sector and was suspected to be corrupt. In 2015, Venezuela again topped the global misery index according to the World Bank. The IMF predicted in October 2015 an inflation rate of 159% for the year 2015, the highest rate in Venezuelan history and the highest rate in the world, and predicted the economy would contract by 10%. Sectors: petroleum and other resources. Venezuela is a major producer of petroleum products, which remain the keystone of the Venezuelan economy. The International Energy Agency shows how Venezuela's oil production has fallen in the last years, producing only 2,300,000 barrels daily, down from 3.5 million in 1998, but with the recent currency devaluation, the oil incomes will double its value in local currency. A range of other natural resources, including iron ore, coal, bauxite, gold, nickel, and diamonds, are in various stages of development and production. In April 2000, Venezuela's president decreed a new mining law, and regulations were adopted to encourage greater private sector participation in mineral extraction. During Venezuela's economic crisis, the rate of gold excavated fell 64.1% between February 2013 and February 2014, and iron production dropped 49.8%. Venezuela utilizes vast hydropower resources to supply power to the nation's industries. The national electricity law is designed to provide a legal framework and to encourage competition and new investment in the sector. After a 2-year delay, the government is proceeding with plans to privatize the various state-owned electricity systems under a different scheme than previously envisioned. Manufacturing contributed 15% of GDP in 2009. The manufacturing sector is experiencing severe difficulties, amidst lack of investment and accusations of mismanagement. Venezuela manufactures and exports steel, aluminium, transport equipment, textiles, apparel, beverages, and foodstuffs. It produces cement, tires, paper, fertilizer, and assembles cars both for domestic and export markets. In 2014, General Motors Venezuela stopped automotive production after 65 years of service due to a lack of supplies, while the Central Bank of Venezuela announced that the shortage rate of new automobiles was at 100%. Agriculture in Venezuela accounts for approximately 3% of GDP, 10% of the labor force, and at least a quarter of Venezuela's land area. Venezuela exports rice, corn, fish, tropical fruit, coffee, beef, and pork. The country is not self-sufficient in most areas of agriculture. Venezuela imports about two-thirds of its food needs. In 2002, U.S. firms exported $347 million worth of agricultural products, including wheat, corn, soybeans, soybean meal, cotton, animal fats, vegetable oils, and other items to make Venezuela one of the top 2 U.S. markets in South America. The United States supplies more than one-third of Venezuela's food imports. Recent government policies have led to problems with food shortages. Trade. Thanks to petroleum exports, Venezuela usually posts a trade surplus. In recent years, non-traditional exports have been growing rapidly but still constitute only about a quarter of total exports. The United States is Venezuela's leading trade partner. During 2002, the United States exported $4.4 billion in goods to Venezuela, making it the 25th largest market for the U.S., including petroleum products. Venezuela exported $15.1 billion in goods to the U.S., making it its 14th largest source of goods. Venezuela opposes the proposed free trade agreement of the Americas. Since 1998, People's Republic of China-Venezuela relations have seen an increasing partnership between the government of the Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and the People's Republic of China. Sino-Venezuelan trade was less than $500 million per year before 1999, and reached $7.5 billion in 2009, making China Venezuela's second-largest trade partner, and Venezuela China's biggest investment destination in Latin America. Various bilateral deals have seen China invest billions in Venezuela, and Venezuela increase exports of oil and other resources to China. Labor. Under Chavez, Venezuela has also instituted worker-run, co-management initiatives in which workers' councils play a key role in the management of a plant or factory. In experimental co-managed enterprises, such as the state-owned Alcasa factory, workers develop budgets and elect both managers and departmental delegates who work together with company executives on technical issues related to production. In November 2010, following the expropriation of U.S. bottlenmaker Owens, Illinois, workers spent a week protesting outside factories in Valera and Valencia. Labor disputes have continued to increase since the financial crisis in 2008. According to the World Economic Forum, Venezuela is ranked as 134th of the 148 countries for economic competitiveness. Many in the private sector attribute these findings to the inflexible labor market. In recent years, a barrage of pro-worker decrees have been passed. The most significant could be the 2012 labor laws known as the LOTTT. These laws included the virtual ban on dismissal, shorter work week, improved holidays, and enhanced maternity benefits. The LOTTT offers job security to most workers after the first month. Employers have reported an absenteeism rate of up to 40%, which they blame on the leniency of these labor laws. As expected, employers have been less willing to recruit. On November 17, 2014, President Maduro issued a decree to increase the minimum salary for all workers by 15%. The decree became effective on December 1, 2014. On April 28, 2015, as part of the May Day celebrations in honor of Workers' Day, President Maduro announced that the minimum wage would increase 30%, 20% in May and 10% in July, with the newly announced minimum wage for Venezuelans being only about $30 per month at the widely used black market rate.